The school in every way was marching forward in its rapid progress, and little wonder that, when considered that the person who continued to be at her helm, Mr. S.A.Mahdi, our principal. The recent honours bestowed on him were marked proof in favour of what everyone thought of him. He had been appointed as an assistant examiner for a degree examination of a well-known foreign university in 1958, and also another honour was bestowed on him, that he had been taken up as a member of the Advisory Council on Asian Education. That a man who had so recently set foot on the shores of Africa had been so honoured spoke volumes for him. Despite the very strict immigration restrictions, the principal, Mr. S.A.Mahdi, who was originally appointed on contract terms, had been made permanent. This was inevitable, of course, because it had been proved beyond doubt that his services were indispensable to the progress of the Alibhai Panju Primary School. The 1957 KAP examination results were quite encouraging, and there was an all-round improvement in every sphere of the school's life. At a large and envious gathering of pupils, the whole school and proud parents, each of the successful candidates in the KAP examinations was presented with a cash prize of shillings 50. That was a substantial sum in those days. And didn't the sight give an extra impetus to the competitive spirit in the breast of each pupil? The children of the school had appeared for the second time in 1958 for the KAP examination, and the results were again improving. All the school's pride in the great strides of progress that the school had so far taken had been enhanced by the excellent performance of the school pupils who set the KAP examinations in 1959. 15 of the 27 who appeared had been sent to grammar streams, and 6 boys distinguished themselves by passing in the G1 grade. The school thus had proved itself to be one of the best among the primary schools of Mombasa. The credit, of course, went to the staff that were faced with an uphill task. Mr. S.A.Mahdi's efforts were demonstrating excellent results all round. He was well settled in the principal's house adjacent to the school with his family, and also had his father to come over from India to visit him and the family and get a glimpse of Mombasa life in general. The family had also acclimatized and got used to the new environment, and the children had made friends easily with a few of the pupils from the school. The family car, Morris Minor, was changed to a brand new blue-white Hillman car that was adored by not only the family but also all in the school and the community. The car was driven by a polite and quiet-natured driver named Mr. Ogola, who was always seen waiting in the driveway next to the principal's house for the next instruction. On the 13th of August 1958, it was a bleak and sad day when the students as well as staff learned, to their horror, that on the night of 12th August 1958, there was an armed robbery which took place at the principal's house. Eyes opened wide in horror at the recital of the terrible events that took place during the night of 12th August, and every limb quivered at the thought of the terrible risk the principal and his family had just gone through and come out safe with their lives, though not their belongings. A gang of 3 had forced themselves into the home and had pangas with them and threatened aggressively the whole family to remain quiet and not to scream or call anyone. It was a very traumatic experience for all, especially the young children. The robbers took away a lot of the valuable stuff from Mr. Mahdi's home, including the Hillman car and a lot of jewelry belonging to Mrs. S.A.Mahdi. It was the most frightening experience one could imagine, and the family members were really moved and even frightened to carry on staying in the same house. The then chairman of the Education Board, Mullah Ali Khaki, provided accommodation to the whole family at his own residence and really looked after them very well. After a period of 2 weeks, the family was able to move back to their own house. Despite this traumatic experience and tremendous material losses, the principal, Mr. S.A.Mahdi, plodded on in the same spirit and with enthusiasm on getting the pupils of the school educated and to become upright citizens. There was no change in his attitude or diminution in his energy or resolve.
It would be no exaggeration to state that the school operated as one big happy family. Cooperation and support existed at all levels, between the managing board and principal, the principal and teachers, and between teachers and students. Overall, there existed within the school a spirit of collaboration amongst all parties, creating a positive, familial environment. Several of the teachers at the school made a significant contribution, for which the Alibhai Panju Primary School will remain eternally indebted. Whilst it is almost impossible to name each of those teachers, there are 2 who stood out, Mrs. Margaret Antow and Mr. N.H. Loving. Their efforts towards the education and conduct of the pupils were unparalleled. Mrs. Antow had taught at the school for 5 years, since its inception. She was one of the most senior members of staff and as such was loved and respected by the school body. The students' grief knew no bounds when she died suddenly during childbirth on the 19th of February 1960. It was a severe and indescribable shock to the school, amplified by the fact that she had been at school the previous day attending to her teaching duties. Mrs. Antow had been a dedicated English teacher. She was instrumental in promoting English language skills with a strong emphasis on grammar and pronunciation. She was also the editor of Progress, the school magazine. She was known for her commitment to the school and exceeded expectations by exerting herself well beyond her routine responsibilities. This was true even during her pregnancy and before she died. Mrs. Antow had elevated the standard of English language within the school to remarkably high levels. The death of Mrs. Antow resulted in the loss of a sincere and talented teacher. She had a scrupulous regard for her duties and instilled the same within her pupils. She could coax and persuade the worst among the students in English to obtain good results. The excellent English language examination results of the school in the past KAPE of 3 years bore testimony to her teaching abilities. The success of Progress magazine was also due to her guidance and hard work. Upon her passing away, the school had lost a successful and conscientious teacher, and her colleagues an esteemed and helpful friend. Mr. Loving was simple in appearance, humble in temperament, and always willing to help anyone in need. However, behind that simple look was an intelligent personality that could identify the needs of the students. He had been a teacher from the school at the Postani Imam Barga, teaching in the most basic surroundings. He taught the Gujarati language and was to that end what Mrs. Antow had been to English. He also wrote Gujarati poetry, in addition to supervising football and cricket games, as well as teaching PE. He was lovingly remembered for introducing the assembly prayer, Labbe Aati Hai Dua, the meaning of which is heartrending. He was also the editor of Gujarati articles published in Progress magazine. His command of the Gujarati language was beyond excellent. He truly believed in the school and had an unwavering confidence in its success. He loved the school pupils in a manner similar to that of a parent. In 1960, he wrote an article for Progress magazine describing the origins of the school and its continuing progress under the leadership of Principal Mr. S.A.Mahdi. Mr. Abbas Nasser, after his appointment as administrator of the school, introduced novel financial systems relating to the payment of fees, receipts, expenses, and general accounts. He was thorough in his duties and demonstrated an excellent flair in time management and orderliness. These traits enabled him to obtain the post of personal assistant to the Mayor of Mombasa Municipal Council. Following the departure of Mr. Nasser from the school, the role of administrator was taken over by Mr. Ghulam Hussain Chakbar. Mr. Chakbar was well known for his vigour and passion. He was highly revered by the students for his kindness, particularly towards pupils who were experiencing difficulties and required welfare assistance. Mr. Chakbar had an amicable temperament and was able to develop excellent relations with both students and teachers, all the while garnering their respect.
A friend who may have happened to pay a tardy visit to the school would for certainly be struck with glad surprise at the changes that had taken place since his previous visit in the bad old days. It may, of course, have given him the surprise of his life when he was welcomed at the very entrance of the school by, of all creatures in creation, the 3 solemn monkeys on the pillars. But hadn't the great writer said that there was method even in madness? Well, these laughter-provoking animals were there not with the purpose of receiving a visitor as some unobservant and undiscerning person may have been led to believe, They were depicted there with a set purpose in mind, that of attracting and holding the eye of the child who passed them every day so as to imprint vividly on its impressionable and tender mind the three great principles: speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil. As one's eye happened to wander from the monkeys, it will be caught by a board on your left. If one cared to spare a few seconds of time on it, one was sure to discover in it a world of knowledge made so attractively accessible to the receptive mind of the pupil. It is even there at the very portal of the school that the child learned the essentials of courtesy, loyalty to the reigning sovereign, rules of the road, respect and pride in self, historical and geographical facts, and what was more, there was a useful tip for the day displayed every day. These were but a few things that the child learnt from the simple square of hardboard. As one took a few steps forward, one would surely stop to admire the beautiful oil paintings on every available space on the veranda walls of the main veins of the head and neck, the lungs, the digestive system, the kidney, the blood circulation, and finally the nervous system of the human body. Impartation of knowledge in these novel, effortless, spontaneous, amusing, and what is more, interesting ways to the receptive mind of the child had actually been the original ideas of the fruitful mind of the principal of the school, Mr. S.A.Mahdi. The credit for the execution of these novel ideas in a vivid, eye-catching manner went to the brilliant brush of the ever-helpful artistic teacher of the school, Miss Premlata Sharma. As one went one's way through the corridor, one was sure to recognize the pearls of wisdom scattered about so discriminately and unobtrusively to be picked up and assimilated by the child. Kindness to animals was inculcated into the pupils by putting at their disposal a cage full of birds as the pets of the school. Besides this cage stood the beautiful crayon executed play card, which brought home to every child's heart the enormity of the crime of cruelty to animals. The credit for this piece of beautiful work went to another artistically minded teacher of the school, Mr. Prempal Sharma, and to the same person went the credit for the brilliant job done in the painting of the scenery for the school stage and for the designing of the cover of the Progress magazine. One other important challenge the pupils faced was that they were very shy, self-conscious, and lacked self-confidence. Mr. Mahdi invited not only the pupils of the school, but staff members whenever there were any celebrations or birthday parties of his children at his house. He always made it a point to share his happiness with pupils and staff of the school whom he considered like part of his family. He would personally serve the guests with that love and warmth that could only be expected from a noble and loving personality like that of Mr. Mahdi.
During the tenure of Mr. S.A.Mahdi as the principal of Alibhai Panju Primary School, the reputation and status of the school had been transformed beyond imagination of the parents and the community members. Those in close touch with the school were fully aware that the greater proportion of credit for the amazing progress was due to the principal, Mr. Mahdi. He had worked hard with true sincerity and purity of heart, spending endless hours and sometimes at great inconvenience to himself. He had also at times contributed his own personal funds to see a project succeed. He had gone over and beyond the needs for his routine responsibility as a principal. He was more than that. He was truly a loving parent for all the pupils of the school. He had supported, encouraged, and rewarded those who were promising students and further enhanced their stature and conduct and achievements. He also was aware of those students who not only had bad habits but who could be a bad influence on others if their deeds went unpunished. He reluctantly had to resort to caning those students. It was very painful and unpleasant for him to carry out the caning, and he used to delegate the task to Mr. Janab Firdausi, the religious teacher, and Malim Khamis, the Quran teacher. Those who have experienced caning don't forget their ordeal to this day. They must have, as they got older, understood the reasons for their punishment and be thankful to Mr. Mahdi for the reformative approach. Looking at the results of academic achievements as well as successes in sports and sports days, it was abundantly clear that the students were selected on merit, and in some it reflects still today. Their achievements then match what happened in their future lives. For all that, the former pupils of Alibhai Panju Primary School will remain eternally indebted to its principal during their time, Mr. S.A.Mahdi.